You learned about the fundamentals of medication assistance. Now we are going to discuss the specific Department of Social Services community care licensing requirements for assisted living communities within the state of California. Community care licensing requires that we have an order for every medication that is given in a community. Whether it is an over-the-counter or prescribed medication, we must have a physician's order in place. According to community care licensing interpretations, a med-aid may take a verbal order regarding stopping or changing of a medication. However, most assisted living communities' policy and protocols do not allow a med-aid to take a verbal order. It is critically important that you clarify this with your supervisor. The best practice is to always obtain a physician order in writing. Oftentimes, physicians will fax orders to our community. On the physician's report, it will be indicated if a resident is capable of self-management of their medications. Some residents are indeed able to manage their own medications. Now, in the state of California, there are 3 individuals that can mandate that medication be centrally stored or locked up and maintained in your medication area. The 3 people that can determine whether or not a resident may centrally store their medications is number 1, the physician. If the physician indicates that the medication must be centrally stored, then indeed a resident may not self-manage their medications. The second person that can make that determination is your licensing program analyst. And finally, the third person that can make that determination is your administrator. The administrator or executive director of an assisted living community may require that medications be centrally stored. And as long as it has been appropriately disclosed to the resident prior to moving in the community, then a community may simply require that all meds be centrally stored. As an experienced caregiver, you know that residents can change from day to day. Now, while a resident might have moved in your assisted living community fully capable of self-managing their meds, things can change over time. Perhaps their memory impairment has worsened, or they've had a major medical setback that would preclude them from having the ability to self-manage medications. If this is the case, as a med-aid, you need to take action should a resident demonstrate unsafe self-management. The physician must be contacted, as well as the resident's responsible party. Immediately discuss the issue with your supervisor so that arrangements can be made that the medications will be centrally stored. Whenever a medication is centrally stored, it must be logged on to the LIC 622 centrally stored medication record. When licensing visits your community, they will check to ensure that every single medication is appropriately logged. On the back of the centrally stored medication record is the destruction log. Every medication that is either returned to the pharmacy or destroyed in an appropriate container within the assisted living community must be listed on the destruction log. In the state of California, there are very specific requirements as to who may assist with medications. A licensed medical professional, such as an RN or an LVN, may assist with medications. A physician may assist with medications. Unlicensed caregivers may also assist with medications. following the parameters set forth by licensing. So let's go ahead and talk about what type of assistance may an unlicensed caregiver provide. To begin with, we want to clearly understand that an unlicensed caregiver may never administer a medication, but they may assist with a medication. They can help a resident to take an oral medication that the resident would swallow. They can help the resident to take a sublingual or a buccal medication. They can help with topical medications, transdermal medications, and with appropriate training, even eye drops, ear drops, and nose drops. There are some things, however, that an unlicensed caregiver may not do when assisting with medications. An unlicensed caregiver may not insert a suppository. An unlicensed caregiver may not administer injections. They may not draw up the medication. They may not pierce the skin. They may not press down on the plunger. So let's talk then about how a caregiver may assist. Let's begin with talking about oral medications. The unlicensed caregiver may take the medication, place it in the cup, and hand the cup to the resident. In the state of California, when assisting with transdermal medications, the MedAide may remove the old patch, cleanse the site, and then they may apply the new patch, asking the resident to gently pat the patch in place. In other words, the resident is assisting and is part of the process. When assisting with topical medications, the caregiver may assist the resident in applying the topical cream, but the resident should be part of the process. Now we are going to talk about California-specific requirements related to use of PRN medications. Whenever a resident has a PRN medication order, whether it is for an over-the-counter medication or a prescription medication, you must obtain a PRN authorization letter. The PRN authorization letter is a signed statement by the physician indicating the resident's ability to determine their need for PRN medications. There are fundamentally three choices that a physician has. Choice number one states that the resident may determine their need for PRN medications. If this is the case, then we may simply give the PRN medications following exactly the physician parameters. The second choice is that the resident is not capable to determine their need for the PRN medication, but can communicate symptoms which would warrant the use of an over-the-counter medication. In that scenario, we may assist with over-the-counter as-needed medications when the resident communicates a need for the medication.
Hi, Jean, what's the matter? I don't feel so good. I got a stomach ache.
In that case, we may assist with PRN medications whenever there is an indicated need for the PRN medication and the resident can communicate their symptoms. However, if the resident can only communicate their symptoms, we may not give a prescription medication, only an over-the-counter medication. Finally, the third choice is that the resident may not determine their need for the PRN medication and may not communicate symptoms. In that case, the physician must be contacted prior to each and every dose of either an over-the-counter or a prescription medication. Even though you have a physician order for the medication, the physician must be contacted each and every time before giving the dose of medication. There are very specific requirements for PRN medication orders. We must, of course, have the name of the resident, the name of the drug, the strength of the drug, the exact dose of the drug, the time frames between doses, as well as the maximum dose in a 24-hour period and the symptoms for which the PRN medication will be used. A complete PRN order will have all Sometimes a physician will want to use sample medications with a resident, a small supply to see how the resident will do on that particular medication. We are allowed to have sample medications in our assisted living communities. However, every sample medication will require the same information as you would find on a prescription label, except of course for name of pharmacy. An assisted living community is allowed to maintain a house supply of medications. Not all communities wish to maintain such a supply, but it is allowable under community care licensing guidelines. The bottles must be clearly labeled house supply. And of course, before giving any medication from the house supply, we must have an appropriate physician order in place along with appropriate documentation. In a previous video, we discussed refusal of medications. And all of the interventions that you learned during that video would certainly apply to a resident living in your assisted living community in California. But we do have some additional regulatory requirements associated with refusal of medications. Anytime a resident refuses a medication, the physician must be contacted regarding the refusal of the medication and any further orders obtained. Be sure to document the date and time of the contact and name of the physician contacted, and of course, any resulting orders. We often have residents that love to go on outings. Some even spend long periods of time away from our assisted living communities, vacationing with family and the like. Current requirements are that we may only send one single dose of medication packaged in a separate container. For example, if a resident were going out to lunch with their son on a Saturday afternoon, we may put the lunchtime meds in an envelope and label the name of the resident, the medications and times the medications are to be taken, along with any special instructions. And we would then give the medication to the son so that he could assist his mother with the meds. Where we have a problem is when a resident goes out for more than one dosing period. Current requirements are that we may only send out one dose in a separate container. Otherwise, we have to send all of the resident's medications with the family member or responsible party accompanying the resident. That means all of the bubble packs, containers, etc. Of course, we will also want to include clear instructions to ensure that the medications are given appropriately. It is recommended that medications are counted when leaving the assisted living community, and a second count takes place as the medications are returned to the community. There are some Department of Social Service community care licensing requirements related to medication errors. In addition to the appropriate steps we previously discussed regarding medication errors, it is essential that an incident report be completed. Licensing must receive this incident report in writing within 7 days and a telephone call within 24 hours of a medication error.